can't handle the truth.
Unbelievable operation, but that was a smaller operation. But it was so precise, so incredible. Nobody thought a thing like that could happen. They even talk about the discombobulator because they never got a shot off. The Russian equipment didn't work. The Chinese equipment didn't work. Everyone's trying to figure out why it didn't work. Someday you're going to find out. But it didn't work. It's nice when you can fly in and not get shot at.
How does the U.S. use electronic warfare in the air and at sea? Well, this small jet is the tip of the spear before the U.S. sends its high-value aircraft into battle. But what strategies does it actually use to blind enemy radar? First, it can use spot jamming to completely overwhelm the enemy's sensors. Second option is it can also create a digital duplicate of itself, tricking enemy missiles into locking onto a phantom target. And the military has another third trick up its sleeve, beaming fleets of fake jets directly onto the enemy's radar screens. But they don't just fire up these electronic weapons blindly. Here's the secret. They've been mapping the enemy's radar systems for months, gathering critical intelligence before transferring all that data directly into these targeting pods being flown by these jets. This is the E-18G Growler's Advanced Electronic Warfare System, where the electronic warfare officer controls all the active jamming pods. The rear seat occupant, known as the ECMO, Electronic Countermeasures Officer, is the critical human element. While the pilot flies the jet, the ECMO controls all jamming systems in real time. He can choose the correct jamming techniques with this ALQ-218 radar. He can use spot jamming to disable a radar like this one. Once the Growler's sensors sniff out the exact frequency of an enemy radar, it doesn't just make noise, it focuses over 10 kilowatts of raw electromagnetic power directly at it. It burns through the system's processing like a blowtorch, blinding the defense grid completely. But the Growler also can emit the Phantom Fleet. It doesn't just blind the enemy, it plays mind games. It catches an incoming radar pulse, scrambles the data, and fires it right back. Suddenly, the radar operator sees dozens of ghost fighter jets swarming their screen. Panic sets in, surface-to-air missiles are fired, but they lock onto Phantoms, detonating the empty sky. But how does it use the bait-and-switch strategy? Even if an enemy missile actually manages to lock onto a real US jet, the Growler pulls a massive bait-and-switch. It perfectly mimics the targeted jet's exact speed and location to create a digital clone. Once the enemy radar locks onto this clone, the Growler slowly drags the fake signal away. The tracking system blindly chases the ghost, and the real aircraft escapes unharmed. Then there is this danger zone or burn-through. Jamming, however, isn't magic. If a US jet flies too close to the enemy radar, usually within 20 to 60 miles, the sheer power of the radar will eventually burn through the jamming and spot the plane. That's why the Growler has to maintain a perfect high-stakes geometric dance, constantly hovering right on the razor's edge of the threat zone. But what is the step-by-step strategy the US military launches the plane? Before a single fighter jet leaves the runway, the invisible war has already begun. For weeks, US spy planes and satellites have been hovering just out of reach, quietly listening. They are hunting for the electronic fingerprints of Iranian radar systems, mapping exactly where they are and how they communicate. They compile all of this into a digital hit list, which gets loaded directly into the brains of the Navy's electronic attack jets, the EA-18G Growlers. Back at command, planners aren't just drawing flight paths on a map, they are navigating a deadly 3D maze. They calculate massive threat rings around every enemy missile system. Then they plot exact coordinates, safe zones in the sky, where the Growlers can orbit and blast their jamming signals without getting shot down. When the strike package finally launches, it is a highly choreographed machine. You have the Growlers for electronic attack, F-35s and Super Hornets carrying the bombs, and specialized jets loaded with radar-killing missiles. Every single aircraft has a precise location, altitude, and down-to-the-second timeline. There is no guesswork. 30 minutes to target. The Growlers reach their standoff positions 50 to 100 miles out. They unleash a massive wave of broadband noise, blanketing the enemy's early warning screens in a thick electronic fog. The goal right now isn't to hide, it's to blind the enemy's big picture view before the real raid even begins. 15 minutes out. The strike fighters push into the kill zone and the growlers move in to escort them. The jamming shifts from a blunt sledgehammer to a scalpel. They inject fake targets into the Iranian screens and scramble their speed and distance readings. The radar operators are drowning in signals, completely unable to tell which blips are real aircraft and which are digital ghosts. Now the enemy faces a terrifying dilemma. If an Iranian operator realizes they are being jammed and tries to crank up their radar's power to see through the noise, they paint a giant bullseye on their own back. U.S. jets instantly fire a supersonic harm missile that rides that radar beam all the way to the source. The enemy's choice is impossible. Turn off your radar and be blind, or leave it on and be destroyed. While the radars are blinded, the growlers are also severing the enemy's vocal cords. They jam the communication networks linking the missile batteries to Central Command. Even if a rogue battery spots a U.S. jet, they can't get clearance to fire, and they can't warn their allies. The mighty air defense network dissolves into a bunch of confused, isolated outposts. Bombs away, but the danger isn't over. As the strike jets pull up to escape, they are low, slow, and highly vulnerable. The growlers don't let up. They maintain a deafening electronic scream, keeping the enemy blind until every last aircraft has safely crossed back over the horizon. On February 28, 2026, the growlers and the rest of the strike force showed the world exactly why America has a $1 trillion military budget. Using a highly advanced mix of electronic warfare and cyber operations, coordinated from space to the ground, the coalition was able to inject false data directly into Iranian radar screens. Top-tier Iranian air defense systems, like their homegrown Baver and their Russian-supplied batteries, were absolutely overwhelmed by this electronic assault. But to actually hunt them down, the U.S. set a brilliant trap. They launched hundreds of ABM-160 MALDs, miniature air-launched decoys. To a panicked Iranian radar operator staring at a chaotic screen, these tiny drones look exactly like a massive squadron of F-15s or F-16s screaming toward the capital. With the door kicked wide open, fifth-generation stealth fighters, including both U.S. and Israeli F-35s with possible F-22 Raptors, sliced through the airspace completely undetected. Ultimately, the Iranian air defense network wasn't just suppressed, it was completely dismantled, at least for the time period. Electronic warfare can also be attached to a Ford-class aircraft carrier, and this is how they used it. They said the airspace over Venezuela was impenetrable, locked down by the Russian-made S-300 anti-system, a beast capable of swatting aircraft out of the sky from 150 miles away. But in the dark night, the myth of invincibility didn't just crack, it evaporated. The opening salvo didn't come from pilots, but from physics. The U.S. Gerald R. Ford, stationed off the coast, unleashed a barrage of electronic warfare so dense it didn't just jam the Venezuelan radar screens, it burned them white. The S-300 operators at Captain Manuel Rios Air Base were blind before they ever saw the missiles coming. The first kinetic strikes were surgical from a destroyer. 2 Tomahawk cruise missiles slammed into the S-300VM radar arrays. In an instant, the eyes of the Venezuelan defense network were turned into twisted, red-hot scrap metal. But one of the most dangerous electronic warfare comes from the disc-shaped objects attached to this Black Hawk helicopter. While the Pentagon hasn't officially disclosed the specific hardware, military experts often call this a soft kill system.
You talked about the weapon, the discombobulator. What is that?
Discombobulator, well, I'm not allowed to talk about it.
But what does it do?
Let me just tell you, you know what it does? None of their equipment works. That's what it does. Everything was... It was my name. I'm very proud of the name. Everything was discombobulated. It was, practically a shot wasn't... they were ready.
Right.
And when we came, they couldn't do anything.
You saw this on the video. You could tell.
Tom, it discombobulated everything.
Nothing worked, even including humans.
Well, let's put it this way.
Out.
We lost no equipment in a very strong, and they're good fighters, great fighters. In a very bad environment, it was a military base, the biggest in South America. Because the house was in a base in in a very, very tough environment, we lost no men and we lost no equipment.
The discombobulator just knocked everything.
Well, it did something.
So how does it actually work? To understand the weapon, you first have to look at what it did. The most likely candidate for a weapon that creates that kind of internal pressure without external sound is a high-power microwave device. It relies on something called the fray effect. The weapon, probably carried by a Chinook or a Black Hawk helicopter, fires a focused beam of pulse microwave energy, not sound waves, that passes right through the skull. These beams are absorbed by the water in the brain tissue and the fluid in the inner ear. This energy causes a minuscule rapid heating of the tissue, less than 1 degree Celsius. But that tiny sudden expansion generates a pressure wave inside the skull. The consequence? The target hears a sound, clicks, buzzing, or a roar that originates inside their own head, bypassing the eardrums entirely. If the frequency is tuned to the resonance of the inner ear, it violently disrupts the body's balance, causing immediate vertigo. At higher power levels, that rapid tissue expansion can rupture capillaries, leading to the reported nosebleeds and internal trauma. There is another possibility, a weaponized infrasonic pulse emitter. Instead of a continuous beam, this device would fire high-intensity slugs of low-frequency air pressure below 20 Hz. These waves travel through the body to match the resonant frequency of internal organs like the stomach or lungs. High-intensity infrasound can actually cause cavitation, the formation of bubbles in bodily fluids. When those bubbles collapse, they create tiny shock waves that damage tissue. The target feels an intense vibration in their gut, leading to severe nausea and effectively paralyzing them with pain and sickness. Tactically, the reports suggest U.S. forces use this technology as the ultimate force multiplier. The result was that the hundreds of Venezuelan guards mentioned in the reports weren't fought in a traditional gun battle. They were incapacitated, sick, dizzy, and bleeding, long before U.S. troops made contact. This allowed a small team of approximately 20 operators to walk virtually unopposed through a much larger force.